my reading is entitled Morning. From the east comes the sun. It has beheld proud cities with gleaming towers, and also the homes of the poor. It has been witness to both good and evil, the works of honest men and women, and the conspiracy of knaves. Now, unsullied from its tireless journey, it comes to us, messenger of the morning, harbinger of a new day. Our speaker this morning, our guest this morning, is Stacey Montooth, Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission. She is a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation, a graduate of Churchill County High School in Fallon, and a graduate of the University of Missouri School of Journalism. She formerly served as Public Information Officer for the Reno-Sparks Indian Colony, and now serves in Governor Sisolak's cabinet as Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission and the Stewart Indian School Cultural Center, which has a beautiful museum. The commission is filled with 5 Native American representatives and serves as a liaison between the 27 tribes and colonies and urban Indians in Nevada. Perhaps you remember Ms. Montooth spoke to us in June, not June, I think it was May. And there was so much to talk about that we have asked her back again. And she has brought a guest. And that guest, she will introduce, but I'll just mention, that guest is Tammy Tiger. And the main discussion by Ms. Tiger will be about Pihimaha, which we have discussed a couple of weeks ago also. Thank you and welcome to both Ms. Tiger, Ms. Montooth, and Ms. Montooth, you're on.
Thank you. Again, I'm Stacey Montooth, and I'm a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation, but I'm here today with you because I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission. And Miss Nancy is exactly right. I had the pleasure of addressing your group earlier in the year, and then Dr. Murphy contacted me recently and said, let's follow up, let's talk more, let's drill down into some specifics. And immediately I thought of my dear friend Tammy Tiger and her experience and exposure to this issue at Thacker Pass. It wasn't until late last week that I learned that you all had a presentation from Plan about Thacker Pass. However, there will be some value in hearing about it from a Native perspective. Tammy has just done an amazing job with other presentations and has some spectacular photos to show with you all. And we're actually going to talk about it as a big part of a nationwide issue. So really, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Tammy is what we call an urban Indian. And I mentioned to Miss Nancy earlier that that's one of the audiences, it's one of the constituencies, excuse me, that the Nevada Indian Commission tries to focus on. We know that there are at least 50,000 urban Indians in the state of Nevada. And what that means is these are citizens of tribal nations that are not indigenous to the Great Basin. So for instance, Tammy is a citizen in the Muskogee Creek Nation. That's based in the Midwest in what is now Oklahoma, but she has chosen to make the Silver State her home. Again, she's one of about 50,000 urban Indians that live in the state of Nevada. I think it's important for you all to know that the Muskogee Creek Nation, it's the fifth, it's one of the 5 civilized tribes. That's a colonial word, but that's a way to convey that they really were sophisticated, highly organized, with a lot of beautiful, rich culture before contact, and they used a lot of traditional ecological knowledge that nowadays we might call science, methods of transportations, methods of trading, methods of even what we call economic development today. And the Muskogee Creek is the fourth largest tribe in the nation. So she comes from a really large tribe. She is an experienced professional with Clark County. She's been working for the Clark County Public Works Administration for well over 20 years now. She's an extremely proud alumni of UNLV. So nobody make any Wolfpack jokes. She's a mom, she's a partner, and perhaps the hardest worker in Indian country. Tammy serves as the Civic Engagement Program Administrator for the Las Vegas Indian Center. I think that technically might be an unofficial title, but she's also on the board. She served as chairman, and most recently, she has connected with the National Organizers Alliance, and that is this amazing group that helps train folks to work on a grassroots level. And so it's not going to take long, and you're going to understand why Tammy is so valuable. She's a great ambassador for Indian country, articulate, kind, beautiful. So I'm going to share my screen, and Tammy is going to go ahead and talk you through this big topic that we have that maybe you all saw the headlines. Pretty controversial. In fact, a public meeting was canceled. It was ended early this week because it got so contentious. So let me turn it over to Tammy. Oh, and I'll watch the chat. So if any of you have questions, go ahead and post them in there and we'll work them into the presentation. Tammy?
Alito, so Ochifoyat, Tammy Tiger, Chatasia, Muskogee Sia. And as Stacy said, that is my introduction. My name is Tammy Tiger. I'm descended from both the Muskogee Creek Nation and Choctaw Nation, 2 of the 5 civilized tribes that migrated from Southeast Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears, or migrated from Southeast America to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears. I have lived as an urban Indian in Southern Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada, for over 35 years. Went to high school there, college there. My family is there, in between there and Oklahoma now. And I'm excited to join you today from Nuwu lands. Typically, I call in from places and I say I'm in the Nuwuvi lands, which is the ancestral lands of Southern Paiute. But I've been here all week working on civic engagement with our Native youth and participating in the redistricting process last week. So very excited to join you. Since you have had a presentation on Pahimaha before, I'm going to touch on some of the more Native perspective of this location, and then go into some of the national work that we're doing to protect sacred sites. And so, Stacy, go ahead and go to the next slide. So for introductions, this photo here is me in the middle with Duranda Hinkey and Gary McKinney. They are 2 of the organizers of the people of the Red Mountain who are doing the work with their Fort McDermott, their Northern Paiute and Shoshone descendants who are doing the work to protect the sacred site that is at the where the proposed mine at Thacker Pass. We're going to talk about Pihimaha from their perspective, the proposed mining and impacts. I'm assuming you probably heard a little bit from Plan, but we'll go through that on the, I have a couple of slides just where the location is relative to the sacred site. Some of the actions that they've been doing to raise awareness on their cause. And then we're going to go into the Red Road to DC, which is the sacred site protection journey of the totem pole that Stacy and I participated in Washington, DC. And then part of that is to raise awareness on it's actually an international legislative movement for free, prior, and informed consent. It was adopted by the UN, and we're trying to bring it here to the United States. And then some more information on how you can help and get involved with protecting Pihimaha and ways to connect and engage with their group. Stacy? Next slide. So these are the people of the Red Mountain who have, this is a photo of them from Reno at one of their organizing events, and this slide describes who they are and why they are doing this movement to try and protect the sacred site at Thacker Pass. Our culture is tied directly to the land. Everything about our lifeways as Native people, Indigenous people, is connected to the land. And so when we look at new development and things that are happening, it's something that is attack on our lifeways and on our people, not just on the land itself. And so the people of the Red Mountain are organized. They are tribal members, but they are not the tribe. They don't speak for the tribe. And just to note too that I don't speak for them, and I just cannot answer anything specifically about their tribe, but I'm happy to take any questions like that and get an answer for you.
Tammy, I think you're probably going to address this, but we've already had someone ask a question. Could you define sacred site? I liked how you outlined that for Indigenous people, our core existence is Mother Earth. Every aspect of our life is related to the balance of our environment. So how would you describe or define how we identify something as specifically sacred?
So sacred could be a place where there are the ancestral remains of our families, our relatives, our ancestors, and much in the way there is actually a federal law that protects those sites as antiquities. It could be a location where there was significant, maybe traditional ceremonies that we held. Or somewhere that we collect medicine for ceremonies and that are integral to our practices and our lifeways. So I think that would primarily. So you see, and you'll see it when we get into the Red Road side. We could even pull up the website on the Red Road journey. Some sacred sites are like Bears Ears, Red Rock Canyon, Valley of Fire. Those are the ones in Nevada that I can think of immediately. There's one that we're also working to protect in southern Nevada called Avikwame. It's called Spirit Mountain. It borders between Nevada, Arizona, and California, and is sacred to 10 different tribes as part of their origin story. All of our tribes have stories of where we originated from, how we came to this area, and so that's usually the primary reason, the primary meaning of where we consider sacred.
That's perfect, Tammy. That's exactly what I would have said. I include Swamp Cedars in that, absolutely Fox Peak outside of Fallon, almost any body of water, because we know that you can't exist without life. The Truckee River, the Carson River, the Carson Sink, the Stillwater Refuge, Pyramid Lake, Walker Lake, of course, Tahoe, Lake Tahoe. Thanks, Tammy.
Sure. So about Pihimaha, this is a location where in, I think it was 1865, there was a massacre that happened. And Pihimaha directly translates to a term called rotten moon. And what happened was there were a military attack on the people that lived there while the hunters were away, and so it was primarily women and children that were there sleeping. And the military came in, and while they were sleeping, just just murdered them all. And then when they left behind their remains, they left them down in the shape of a crescent moon. And so when everyone came back to that location, that's how they found them. And so that has been a place where they've gone to pray for their ancestors over the last more than 100 years. And they still go back there. You probably heard from or maybe other environmental groups that it's also the source of some species of plants and animals that are in Nevada. I think there's a protected sage grouse. There's some plants there. There's a buckwheat, I think, a buckwheat also that they've been working to protect. But for us, those plants and medicines we consider are living relatives to us. And in addition to that location being sacred to us because of what happened, environmental impacts for us are cultural impacts. We are the land, and the people are synonymous, is a statement that I made recently when I was speaking to some legislators about redistricting, just because they said, well, there's no people on the other side of that boundary. And it's like, well, anything that happens to that land happens to our people. Anything that is within the realm of how we exist is our people. And it's essentially a part of our lifeways, like I explained earlier. So next slide. And here it is, the description of what happened and how we compare it to something in more of a United American sense. If you dug up our cemetery, it would be essentially similar to if you were to dig up, any cemetery where there was a battle or a massacre that happened, something that everyone holds high value to in these days and is protected as a monument, so like Arlington National Cemetery. And then here's an excerpt from the autobiography of William Haywood. We've been looking, or the people of the Red Mountain have been looking really hard to find documentation of what happened here, because in our ways, our traditional ways as Indigenous people, a lot of our history is oral. And so a lot of this has been storytelling and carrying down what happened. Well, unfortunately, that's not respected or valued when it comes to the court systems and those types of histories that we have to prove. Native Americans, it feels like we have to prove everything about our identity, from our blood quantum to our sacred sites. And so in this excerpt, I'll go ahead and read it off. I'm sorry, I've been speaking. This is a little hoarse. Daylight was just breaking when we came in sight of the Indian camp. All were asleep. We unslung our carbines, loosened our six-shooters, and started into that camp of savages at a gallop, shooting their wickiups as we came. In a second, sleepy-eyed squaws and bucks and little children, sorry, this story is, I learned of it just, over the summer, and it's really heartbreaking. In a second, sleepy-eyed squaws and bucks and little children were darting about, dazed with the sudden onslaught, but they were shot down before they came to their waking sense. And so this is what happened at this location, and this is why it is so important to the people of the Red Mountain and to all of us as Indigenous people. Tribal sovereignty and the rights that we have as tribal nations is important to all of us, whether I'm a part of that tribe or another tribe, because I have similar locations like this with my tribe, and so that's why I work so hard to do and support this effort. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So this is a screenshot from Lithium, Nevada, and exactly where the site is located. It's, like you said, in the Thacker Pass area within the McDermott caldera, which is, is an ancient volcano. We talked about how there are different mining sites that include lithium sites throughout Nevada, and, why was this location picked? And of course, we know it's to advance going away from fossil fuels to lithium as a source for electric batteries, and lithium is in batteries and all of the technological iPhones and everything that we have. We're so mobile now, and so lithium is a part of that. And there is an ore here that they extract the lithium from through a process that they say has been, I've watched the videos too from the mining company that says that they do it in a clean way, but they're using sulfur and they're using a lot of chemicals to, it's an open pit mine, and so they're using a lot of chemicals to extract this ore and the lithium from it, and tons of water and tons of fossil fuels to have the trucks travel there. It is Lithium Nevada is a Canadian company. It's not American as well. And part of our issue with this, with the permit, is that it was rushed through without a proper environmental assessment during the last administration, literally signed on the last administration's last day of office. And it was about the assessment was about 1/3 the size of a normal environmental assessment would be. It did not include proper consultation with the tribal nations of this area, sending them a letter while they were off on leave due to the pandemic. Many people were off last year because of the pandemic on leave. And so those communications were not received in time to voice their opposition to the permit. Next. And so here is what this location will look at before and after the mining, and this is just an example of what open mining does to the land. And Stacy can probably attest to all the pollution and things that happen after mining. And while there are reclamation laws, you don't have a lot of teeth to hold mining companies to come back and actually try and clean the air, clean the water. Just when I was in Walker River yesterday, they spoke about all of the pollution coming from, I think it's the Fallon Air Force Base or somewhere in that area where they had discharged into Walker Lake, and how the quality of the water has been affecting the tribe there. Stacy, did you have anything on the mining? Good. Okay. Did you all see this video? It's the horseback ride that was held up there.
No.
No? Okay, so I do have a couple of quick videos, but I like this video because this gentleman from People of the Red Mountain really speaks about why they are doing what they're doing, and you can hear it in their own words. Stacey, if you can start that.
Everyone for showing up. Really appreciate it. So what's going to happen today is real quick. Us riders are going to ride from here. Kenny's going to sing us out of here, sing the honor song, prayer, blessing on our way. And then in camp, the drum group's going to walk us to camp. But by 3 o'clock, depending on how far we've gotten, I'll send the rest of the riders on and I'll do it on my own. Okay? So then everybody go to camp, you guys can eat, sing, dance, whatever you want to do. So from here, I'm going to give it to Kenny.
Thank you. What these guys are doing is a noble thing. It's an honorable thing. To every generation that's here right now, we're passing this message on. How to handle these things, how to handle these situations. But right now, it's in an awareness, right now, what it can do, what the damage is going to be, what the long-term effects are, what the short-term effects are. There's that illusion of jobs and money, but it doesn't talk about the long-term effects. Sure, it might be accommodating to have the electric car, but we look what over time, look what all these corporations have done to the land already. So this is just the beginning of what's in store. So again, I'm going to reiterate, we show our children, these generations that's here, how to handle it, not through violence, but awareness. People are scared when they act in violence. It's reaction. Violence is a reaction. Fear is a reaction. If they've not taught any other way, that's how they're going to react. So, showing everybody, these little ones, and to the elders, the most eldest one here, we show each generation, this is how you handle it. This is how you handle it when you get scared, when you're frightened, when you feel like raising your hand. There's other ways, and this is just one of them. So I'm going to sing this song. You pray the best way you know how, through your heart. Clear your mind and clear your heart. It's the only way this is going to work, is through prayer. And that's what we're showing everybody today.
Gotta love the internet bandwidth in this area. So I'm happy to share those videos with you directly. So too, because I know they didn't play fully. I love the drum, the sound of that drum. So here are just some of the actions that they have been doing to raise awareness on this. They've had walks and horseback rides and different organizing efforts in Reno and Winnemucca, and they've established a camp that's led by the Indigenous people, the people of the Red Mountain there, up north as well. I think the next one also has some more photos, Stacy. Here's some of our elders. And then with this slide, I just want to raise one other point about the fear that we have with this mine that's coming, is that as we know with the oil pipelines and anywhere that there is a significant construction project, it brings what we call man camps. And it brings, there's going to be 1,000 workers on this mine. And so that's 1,000 men from all over the country coming to this area to work. And they set them up with, small housing within the area. And unfortunately, we don't know who these people are, what the background has been done, and what we've experienced with our communities that are most directly impacted by mining or pipeline projects. Are missing and murdered Indigenous women at a higher rate than any other women across the country. And so it's actually been declared a national epidemic that Indigenous women come missing and murdered from these areas at a higher rate, like I said. And so that is also a fear that we have when these 1,000 men come to work. They say that they're bringing jobs. It's 1,000 short-term jobs and 300 long-term jobs. but the impact to our people, our land is, and our families is, generations. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So there's a camp that was established. It's very cold up here, and so there are different ways that you can help. They've been working to get more attention, raise more awareness. If you know there are other groups that we can connect with, presentations to provide information. They're taking donations on a GoFundMe site, letters of support to your representatives. We all know that communicating with our representatives and how we feel is impactful for policymaking and having things be changed. And then we're also this is how we came to be connected with National Organizers Alliance. Stacy, the Red Road to DC was launched. If you want to go to the next slide. Oh, did you take out the Red Road to DC? Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Oh.
that's okay. There is a Red Road to DC national effort. It carried I think a 25-foot totem pole that was carved from a 400-year-old cedar tree by the Northwest tribes, the Lumi Nation. And it's a beautiful totem pole, and it was carried all across the different sacred sites throughout the country and blessed by the people of those locations. And then it was welcomed by Secretary Deb Haaland in DC at an event that I participated in, and was honored to be able to carry the message about Pahimaha to a large crowd and in front of the Capitol. We also hosted a virtual visit of the totem pole journey for Pahimaha here in Nevada. And so on redroadtodc.org, you can visit that website and see some videos and different stories about all the sacred sites in our country.
This is, yeah, this photo of this gentleman on the far left. There's a picture you can see, that's the totem pole, but it's massive. It is huge and it's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. And then, so that last slide had the different websites, and if you're on social media, they have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. They just started a YouTube with some of those videos of the different work that they're doing, and they are working on their own website. So there is the Thacker Pass website and social media also that is by an environmental group, and this is Pahimaha, which is led by the indigenous people of this area. And this is a quote that came from the people of the Red Mountain, and it says, "For quite some time now, our history and our culture has been very quiet. Our ceremonies used to be outlawed, and it wasn't okay to be us. We are the ones now telling reasons why we shouldn't allow lithium on this part of Turtle Island." Are there any questions? And I'll just make a quick note. We know that lithium, the turn away from fossil fuels to lithium is part of the 30 by 30, reduce protect 30% of our environment within the next 30 years. It's national, it was adopted statewide. But what we ask for is a just transition to this new energy source. And by just transition, we mean that there are proper consultation and environmental assessments done of these areas, and specifically how they impact indigenous people before decisions are made on their locations and what's going to happen. As the people that have been in these areas since time immemorial, we know best, about the land and where it would be maybe least impactful to water sources and plants and the medicines that we share, but what's good for everyone, what's good for I'll say what's good for the fish is good for the people from Norm Harry. You all probably have heard of Norm Harry, but these protections are not just for Indigenous people. This is for everyone. This is going to impact everyone's water source and air quality. And so as these decisions are made on mining and moving towards lithium, we just need to make sure that it's done in a just way. So thank you.
So Tammy, there's a couple of questions here in the chat. Could you talk a little bit more, let's see. Someone wants to have a little bit more of an understanding between, and this is the word in the chat, a white man's world graveyard, as opposed to how our ancestors might be buried, or and how that becomes a sacred site.
Well, there is the Antiquities Act, which protects graves. There was actually legislation in Nevada that came from Reno Sparks, right, Stacy, about protecting and having more enforcement on protecting grave sites when it comes towards development of areas. So I guess the difference is that ours aren't as well documented probably, and so there needs to be that consultation with the people of that area to really truly know, because sometimes we don't tell everybody where they are because we want them to remain protected and not visited and not become necessarily somewhere that people go to. So I would just say it's not as well documented is probably the biggest difference. And so it's not, I would say when it comes to a legal sense, that's why we have to find documentation and prove, and they don't take our traditional ways of oral storytelling into the same, it's the same standard.
I think I might have touched on this the last time we were all together, and I apologize if I'm telling you stuff, but just to really be fundamental, prior to contact, what we call the Big Four now in the Great Basin, the Northern Paiute, the Southern Paiute, the Washoe, and the Western Shoshone, our ancestors didn't homestead, right? They followed the food. Again, the environment was the core of our existence, and we continue to hold on to that. And because we were so in balance with our environment, we didn't stay in one place. And so I think that might be the easiest way to explain the physical manifestations of cemeteries and for our sacred sites, because we didn't, nowadays, I'm in Carson as well. So in Carson City, we have several designated locations where loved ones are laid to rest. But with our people, there wasn't one spot. It was usually where a person walked on, where they were when they passed. And, that's all over this amazing area. And that is one of the big issues with the expansion of the Naval Air Station out in the Fallon, Churchill County area. It's surrounded by federally recognized tribal nations now, indigenous territories to several different Northern Paiute groups, the Walker River, the Fallon Paiute Shoshones, the Yamba Shoshones. And so we know, because our ancestors tell us, our loved ones are there. We don't have a plot map, but we know that they're there. And there was just one other thing Tammy mentioned that I thought might be important to go back on. She read that very difficult passage about why Thacker Pass is a sacred site, because our stories, right? We didn't even have we didn't even write our language down until we had to. And that was, again, because of contact. But in the recent decision that was made, the federal judge that rendered the decision to allow the lithium mine to move forward, I'm looking at her direct quote. She said to the Reno Gazette-Journal that the court agrees that some of the additional evidence highlights the shameful history of the treatment of Native Americans by the federal and state governments, but it doesn't persuade the court. And she goes on to say that they won't reconsider. She says that the newly discovered evidence, and to our people, this isn't news. This is information that has been passed on for generations. But she said that the newly discovered evidence is too speculative. So again, I think that highlights what Tammy was sharing with us, in that our oral traditions aren't given the same value as in mainstream America. I know it's Sunday and we're talking about values and about spiritual beliefs, but I mean, why is it so hard for non-natives to believe that Noah was able to build this ark and put 2 of every animals in this big vessel that, somehow he kept the, gazelle from being eaten by the hyenas? But when we have our stories, they're dismissed. Tammy, there's some other questions in the chat. Someone asked if it's possible for the lithium mine to operate while still protecting Red Mountain, our sacred sites.
That is an excellent question, because just recently Chaco Canyon, a perimeter around Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, was protected by federal government so that no development or activities could happen within a certain perimeter of that sacred site. I can't answer if that would be acceptable by the people of the Red Mountain, but I would hope that something like that could be considered maybe as a compromise to where the activities are going to happen for the mining, or they could find somewhere else in Nevada. I assume they selected the site because of its proximity to a major highway and Tesla and all of those. Who's going to be using the lithium? We have to remember. So I don't see why there couldn't be either further exploration to find lithium deposits, or if the people of the Red Mountain would accept that some type of protection boundary be set around this area.
We have another question in the chat about the EPA and about the work that's being done with the EPA and whether a legal challenge is in the works. Tammy, do you have any information about that?
I just a little bit. I've heard that the state decision is one, but as federal tribal nations, we are sovereign, and we have an inherent sovereignty that requires the federal government to work with the tribes as a government-to-government relationship. And I've heard that they are elevating this to the federal level, which would then put, I assume, any state actions on hold until that could be worked through, if it's determined to be like a protected location as under the Antiquities Act. So, but I'm not sure about specifically if they're going back to do any more studies or not. I've heard conversations about it, but I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen.
I think some of those questions could have been answered earlier this week. I mentioned at the beginning of the program that a public meeting was interrupted. It was actually canceled in progress. So up in Winnemucca, there was an attempt to have a conversation about not just the overall operation, but specifically about certain permitting. And because of, I guess, rancor, the meeting wasn't productive because the discourse wasn't cordial, which probably everybody here knows that that's sort of par for the course with any public meeting, whether we're talking about the school board or Congress. So I know that there's another meeting on December 1st, and I would imagine that there'll be different parameters. Maybe now it'll be online, something along those lines, so that the public comment or public interruption could be controlled a little bit more. Miss Nancy, is it okay if we kind of widen up the conversation a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, so Tammy, somebody specifically asked about redistricting. You mentioned at the beginning of the program that that's what brought you down to the Numa country, is your work at the legislature. So could you tell the audience how redistricting is impacting Nevada tribes?
Sure. As you know, the redistricting process happens every 10 years after the census to ensure that we have equal representation within each of the electoral districts. And this was really the first time that I would say we've had this much involvement by communities of color, and specifically from what I could find working with tribal nations and Native American urban populations in Southern Nevada. We had an 89% growth of the Native American population in the last 10 years. And so we wanted to ensure that we had our voices included into this process. We worked with a coalition statewide to collect communities of interest in Southern Nevada and then here in Northern Nevada, and specifically with the tribal nations. What we found was that there were a few of the tribes were split in their state and federal electoral districts, and we wanted to ensure that those tribal boundaries took precedence over county lines. The state legislature used county lines last time in 2010 to draw the boundaries and say, like, well, we'll drop it here. And as you know, in rural areas, the boundaries are a little more flexible because when you look at one person, one vote, they're making sure that the population is there. But the land boundaries, they were just trying to keep it clean and keep the counties had asked that you keep them within one district. But since we had a few tribes that were split across counties, we wanted to make sure that their boundaries took precedence over the county boundaries and that those electoral districts were contained. The tribe was contained within singular electoral districts. And so that's what we testified for. And so we were successful in having state legislature amend their proposed maps to include Walker River into one state assembly and Senate and congressional district, and as well as Reno Sparks area and I believe the Las Vegas Paiute lands as well in Southern Nevada, because the Paiute have a colony that's central in the city, and then they have residents that are closer to the Snow Mountain area.
So we just got a reminder that we have 10 more minutes. Does anyone else have any questions about Red Mountain, our nationwide quest to protect our sacred sites, about redistricting?
I saw one question, which was where to send donations to support people of the Red Mountain and the camp.
Well, I will add that to the chat happily. As Tammy said, it's getting cold up there. You know, this morning when I left my house, there was frost on my roof. I can't imagine how cold it was overnight, all the way up there at Fort McDermott. Tammy, Leah and CJ are wondering if there are ways to elevate or protect the oral history at the state and federal level. Do you have any suggestions for that?
I think that is usually an initiative led by the tribes and their tribal historic preservation offices. I would say that funding towards these different initiatives and letting your representatives know that they should make funding a priority to tribal nations so that we can do these Indigenous-led activities is extremely important. AB 264 was passed in 2019 legislature, and we've been told that was an unfunded mandate, which in a public meeting. And I will say that you know, for too long, many of the treaty obligations of the United States that which carry down to the states have not been upheld due to reasons like that, like, oh, there's not enough funding, or we're put last on the list for funding. So directing those resources directly to the tribes so that they can lead their efforts in doing so is very important. And communicating your support of that as an ally, it would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I agree. That's I think when we talk about the different approaches that our Indigenous people take to, you know, everything from the environment. You know, you heard the video right from the people that are on the front lines, that they feel like at the core, this issue is about money and jobs. Now, I don't mean to say that Indigenous people don't believe in hard work or gainful employment, but you know, we have just a little more tempered approach. And so that's kind of the same parallel you can make with implementing any kind of programs. You know, I think that in most of our state, I'm thinking specifically about education, I hear a lot about how it's important to do that at the local level, right? Churchill County doesn't want bureaucrats in Carson City to tell us what to do. Worse yet, we don't want people in Washington, D.C. to tell us what to do, right? But that same kind of standard doesn't hold true for our sovereign tribal nations, right? That's been an issue since the formation of the United States government. It's almost a maternalistic, right? And there are a lot of people that feel like Indian people are just showered with all these entitlements, right? But in fact, first, that's not true. But second, that's the relationship that the federal government set up with our Indian people. You know, it was a specific strategy to try to make our relatives dependent on the federal government, right? Everything from food to education. And so I really think what Tammy was saying is so valuable. There has to be some trust, right? We have to have allies who believe that we can take funding or we can take programs and shape them and individualize them for what we believe is the most appropriate way for our communities.
I have a question on Judge Dew's decision. What I read sounded to me as if it was preliminary. Is that not true? I thought what she allowed to go forward were test holes to be examined. And that's the reason that there wasn't an appeal. Is that correct?
I read an earlier decision that came out, I don't know if it was a month or so ago from her, that was my same understanding. But there is exploration going on right now, like you said, and that she would have a final decision in January or something like that. But at the same time, I think the people over the Red Mountain are working to elevate it to the federal level.
Okay, so are they also trying to make sure that the test holes are in areas and specific areas and carefully chosen?
I'd certainly hope so, that they would consult with the tribe and to determine that. I'm not sure if they are, though. Yeah, you happen to know? Yeah.
Yeah, I know we're getting close to time. I want to thank Bob for all of your guidance in the chat. I know I have, and I think Tammy, you used the word sovereignty a couple times, and you know that's a really big word, and it's my oversight that we didn't define that. So I'm going to take a stab, and then Tammy, if you follow up. You know, when I try to describe sovereignty to people, you know, it's a long, hard to spell word, and I'll try to break it down a little bit. But our tribal nations, our tribal communities, Indigenous people, we believe we have a God-given right. The Creator granted us the ability to govern ourselves, and that is sovereignty, right? The Creator's endowment to us to be able to determine what's best for us, sort of what I was just talking about. However, again, it's a big concept, and sometimes it's easier understood if it's more applicable. So as you all know from previous presentations, we do have the big four groups in Nevada: the Southern Paiute, the Northern Paiute, the Washoe, and the Western Shoshone. But within those big four, we have the 27 tribal nations, bands, and colonies. And earlier, Miss Nancy introduced me and said that, you know, as an executive director of the Nevada Indian Commission, I communicate, I liaise, if you will, with all of those sovereign governments. So in addition to the 27 in the state of Nevada, there are actually 574 federally recognized tribal nations. Federally recognized means they have an established relationship. They have a government-to-government relationship with the federal government, with the United States of America. So what I'm trying to convey is that just like the Prime Minister of Canada or Angela Merkel of Germany might be able to deal directly with President Biden, so would Chairman Arlen Melendez of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, or Amber Torres of the Walker River Paiute Nation. When you come to our tribal reservations, to our tribal land bases, we have our own constitution. We have our own Bill of Rights in some cases. We have our own speeding laws, our own curfews, all those things, again, that a community determines is for the greater good of their people. So when we talk about sovereignty, again, the fact that a company wants to come on to indigenous lands of Native Americans, it follows, and we have Supreme Court decisions. Native people are mentioned in the United States Constitution. It follows that not just these companies, but the state of Nevada, the county of Winnemucca, the county of Elko, that Humboldt, that they deal directly with our tribal nations. What did I miss, Tammy?
I would only just add that in the political sense, our sovereignty was not granted to us. Our sovereignty, we existed here on this continent long before it was discovered by Europeans, and I shouldn't use that word, but before everyone else came here. And so those more political relationships, those treaties are recognized in the Constitution. And as Stacy said, that's why the Supreme Court continues to uphold them.
I want to, oh, just one more thing. I'm sorry.
Good, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see that Dr. Murphy has joined us. So I wanted to say hello and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for allowing me to bring in a real expert on this issue. Tammy mentioned that she doesn't speak for the people of the Red Mountain. Certainly I don't either. I don't on this issue, and as the executive director of the Nevada Indian Commission, I never speak for our tribal nations, but as Indigenous women, you know, we can provide insight and hopefully give some value to your forum as you all stay civically engaged. And just thank you so much for your time this morning.
You have been so informative, and we certainly thank you for making yourselves available and for answering our questions. I see Dr. Murphy there. It looks as if he's in his vehicle. If you have the ability to say something, do you wish to?
Oh, there we are. Yeah, I've had some difficulty hearing on my cell phone, but Stacy, thank you very much for doing this. I think we'd like to have you back in the future, and particularly to talk more about the problem of the disappearance and abuse of Native American women, and economic disparities that need to be addressed with respect to all Native Americans. And so let's stay in touch.
And I need to put in a plug. Nancy mentioned that she's come out to our cultural center. I want to personally invite all of you to come out to the Stewart Indian School to take a look at our cultural center. You know, Tammy talked specifically about the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women as it's connected to what are often referred to as man camps, when you have this influx of people that don't have ties to the community, that have a whole different mindset about their day-to-day existence. And you know, we've been talking a lot. In fact, it's been kind of a tough week. The Department of Interior had its first of three, it had two of its first three consultations about the impact of boarding schools. And we actually, the Nevada Indian Commission is really proud to be able to host an event in a couple of weeks. All of our tribal chairs are bringing elders to the campus, and we're going to have a meeting with Governor Sisolak to talk about how the state can support our tribal nations. It was mentioned during those consultations this week that the boarding schools, the federal government's specific plan to take children from their families, from their traditional lands, that really could be considered the start of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And unfortunately, I think that's accurate. So please you'll learn more about the history of the boarding schools and if you can come out to campus.
Yes, it's a beautiful museum. The beadwork that was, and baskets, just beautiful. Well, thank you very, very much once again. Any last comments? No last comments? Okay, we shall see you again. Yes, thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye-bye.